All right, and we're on the air. I'm here talking with Eiynah, AKA NiceMangos. If you're listening to this, you've probably heard of her. Um, she's an ex-Muslim blogger, and just wanted to talk to her about sort of what that means in the Trump era and some of these sort of recent controversies in that arena. That she's a very, I think, articulate and interesting person on those issues. So I'm very pleased to have her on my little YouTube thing. I'm creating sort of as a hobby.
Thanks, Alex, for that very kind introduction.
Yeah, that's nice. Nice to talk to you.
Thanks. It's always nice to talk to you too. And happy 4th of July. I'm honored that you would want to spend it with a Canadian.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we did invade your country during the Revolutionary War. It's a little bit sad we didn't take it over. I
mean, yeah, no.
I guess. Well, if you think about it, if Canada was part of America, then
we'd have Trump. So no.
No. Then Hillary would have won because.
That's what you'd like to think, but maybe we'd all just be like you.
Oh yeah, maybe you would have America would have rubbed off on you, and you wouldn't be a liberal anymore.
Right.
This is kind of like a ahistorical conversation. I know it's a rabbit hole we don't get into.
But, right. Yeah. Let's not get into that.
Yeah, but I sort of the sort of big conversation I sort of wanted to have is how does it feel to be this person who's in this sort of atheist, skeptic community who's been a critic of sort of the fundamentalist Islam and someone who's really sort of, you have to be a critic of it because you've sort of, lived through it yourself and, and now
Some will tell you otherwise, but don't believe them.
Yeah, I can't even deal with that. But you've sort of that's the world you've sort of come from. That's sort of like what your bailiwick is. Mm-hmm. Then we've had this, that community, especially since Trump has, and Le Pen and this sort of right-wing movement in Europe has gotten real steam. It's become a very sort of fraught place to be. You come from Canada and you've had Gad Saad and Jordan Peterson and those kind of people. They're sort of a mainstream part of the people who are, listening, who would have listened to you maybe 2 years ago or something like that. So what's your perspective on that? How does that feel?
Well, firstly, I'm going to say it feels really shitty. It feels like the ground has been removed from under my feet. I'm just trying to get my bearings all over again because this changes everything, right? People who I assumed all along were principled liberals who would, stand up against these terrible, ideas like misogyny, transphobia, and things like that. Just because, I saw them doing that against the Islamic right. But now is a chance for people to show that they are consistent, and not many people are, because many people are going along with the Western right. In fact, more and more atheists I see are giving a pass to the right or, crossing the lines when they claim they're defending Milo's free speech, but they actually end up defending Milo or Richard Spencer or, it's really off-putting. The anti-feminism, it's like I thought I left this stuff behind.
Right. Well, it's the reason that you are an ex-Muslim, or the reason that you're a critic of the values in fundamentalist Islam, or the right in Pakistan, or the right of the culture you come from, is the same reason that you hate Donald Trump, right? It's completely of a piece, right?
Right. I mean, I'm sure there are some people maybe listening that are like, oh, but how many heads has Donald Trump chopped off? Or he's not forcing anyone to wear a hijab, or yeah, but you have to take these things in context, right? In the Western context, Donald Trump is as far right as you can get, pretty far right. I'm not equating him to like ISIS or anything like that. Of course, that's worse. But just because ISIS exists and it's worse, it's always going to be worse than almost anything we can dream up, right?
Right.
It doesn't mean that you give them a pass over here in the West to be transphobes, misogynists, homophobes, whatever.
Right. Well, the sort of feminist values, or, you know, the religious pluralistic values that make you, you know, concerned about fundamentalist Islam are the same things that are implicated by, you know, the rightward move of the sort of atheist community, and the rightward move of just the world, you know, the Western world in the last few years. It's the same, it's of a piece completely.
Yeah, it's really disturbing to see that. And it's really disturbing to see that most people are not consistently criticizing it, right? Like, I feel so out of step with the ex-Muslim, mainly over this, because so many prominent ones are happy to align with Dave Rubin because it gives them access to a larger platform. Or, you know, they've gone on Gad Saad's show, but they won't, you know, if they have any critiques of him, they won't actually come out and say it. It's very much like turn a blind eye to the bad actors on our side, but hammer away the bad actors on the other side. And it just seems very biased and troubling to me.
Well, it's, if you think about it, the people who are critics of religious dogma have bought into what is essentially this sort of these people who are willing to totally befriend and ally with folks who are conspiracy theorists, who are talking about Pizzagate and Alex Jones and all this sort of complete nonsense that goes against, if you're a skeptic about religion, if you call yourself a skeptic, you can't be a Pizzagate person, right?
Right. But I mean, in their defense, they'll just ally with Rubin, who allies with Pizzagate people. But I mean, I just don't understand how you cannot call that out in your
Well, it's
closest allies.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it comes down to your sort of basic integrity about what you're about. You know, if you really can't use, you know, you have to be against the conspiracy theorists and the Donald Trump, you know, because there is this element to the, what I think it's called the anti-SJW community.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of it's people on YouTube. It's the people who are, you know, posting on the Donald Trump Reddit page. And these people are so far right. And a lot of them are straight up anti-Semites, white nationalists. I mean, they're tantamount to neo-Nazis. And when you're sort of tiptoeing on the same ground as them, and you're sort of allowing yourself to be used by them, it's infuriating, right?
Right. And I mean, if your thing is that you call out, you know, bad verses and things like that in like ancient codes of morality that are pretty removed from our existence today, but yet you're still like, you know, after a terror attack, you'll post like Quran verses or whatever and be like, look, the Quran itself is problematic. Well, why the fuck can't you apply that standard to someone who's speaking out on this shit today and bringing more and more misogynists into the fold, like Rubin, like, you know, whoever these anti-SJWs are that people ally with? It's really disturbing.
Yeah.
Because it's the same things, right? It's the same themes creeping in, the same misogyny via Cernovich. Like, okay, whether it's Cernovich or whether it's the Quran, it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah, well, it seems to me that there's this element in a lot of the criticism of Islam that becomes this, it's almost like a slippery slope narrative where you tend to view, you have a negative view of, like, let's call it fundamentalist Islam, because obviously there are liberal Muslims, and you don't want to sort of lump them in and sort of speak with a broad brush, but there's critics of fundamentalist Islam. And what it can tend to sort of fall into is a sort of like a clash of civilizations narrative.
Yeah.
And a sort of a paranoia, or this sort of like statistical thinking where you're saying, well, you know what? If we have immigration from Muslims, that technically means that there's going to be more people who are fundamentalist, Salafi, extremist Muslims in our country. So therefore, we ought to judge people who are coming to our country from, let's say, Somalia in a certain way and say, you know what, we probably don't want them to immigrate to our country. They're not going to assimilate to our liberal values. And that sort of a like logic progression, it's very insidious, but it comes into a lot of people's thinking. And just to me, it sort of neglects the fact that if you look at someone and say your background is Somalian, therefore you have these beliefs that I don't like, it's basically racism. It's assumption about someone that is negative based on their national origin, right?
Right. And it doesn't take into account all the people that are victims of this stuff. You know what I mean? Like whenever they're showing girls getting genitally mutilated or, you know, homosexuals being mistreated in Islamic countries, those people are also Muslims.
Right.
From those countries, right? So if you're championing these people or you care so much about women in Saudi Arabia, then why are you so hateful of immigrants in general?
Yeah, but I think that there's that element of it, but it's also the element of there is a basic violence you do to someone when you look at what country their ancestors came from and what country they immigrated from and start making very negative, totalistic judgments about them, right? Like, you know, I understand if the United States was saying, we're not going to admit someone to the United States unless they have a job at a company or they export something to college or something. Like, that makes sense because it's like an economic necessity. You can't bring in every person who wants to come into the United States. And that's totally, like, there's this sort of leftist far, like, narrative that everyone who's not a white nationalist gets strawmanned into, where you want totally open borders and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, that's not me at all. People go on and on saying how I'm like this person who favors open borders, but I'm really not. Like, you know, I've had conversations with people who say that even, you know, people who are terror suspects and stuff should be allowed in, and I'm like, what? No.
Yeah, well, I think that there's this paranoia that comes into people's minds where they think we are in this serious danger that Muslims are going to reach a certain threshold of population in the United States, and then, you know, they're like this Mongolian horde coming into our country and ruining it.
And then, like, you know, Sharia will be implemented across the land.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is so amazing is that it's such a low view of American culture or, you know, what Western European culture, that it's going to be destroyed because of immigration of, you know, 5% of the population or what have you. Like, people are not going to assimilate. Like, you know, half my ancestors were Jews,
right?
and they're not wearing like giant, you know, fur hats and, you know. They're as American as anyone else, right? And it has to come down partially to racism, right? They're not concerned about immigration from Finland turning America into Finland, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you have these people like, you know, Douglas Murray, who are putting that sort of. I think Sam Harris does this to an extent too. He sort of allows the sort of a racist. I don't know, racist, but
oh boy, you just sent a horde of attackers.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think the way he talks about it, the way Sam Harris talks about, like, you know, Muslim immigration to America, it's a little bit irresponsible, and I think it's a little bit, it's too easily co-opted by people who are using those fears to push a racist agenda and push an agenda of viewing America as a white Christian nation. And that is what they're trying to preserve culturally.
Well, look, I mean, I had a 3-hour podcast with Sam, and I have, you know, so many disagreements with him. And yeah, you know, I don't understand how he's cool with someone like Douglas Murray, for example. And we talked about that. Of course, I got attacked for that. I'm still getting hate mail for that. How dare I, you know, oppose him on things? And why didn't we just sit and talk about how bad Islam is, because we agree about that? But it doesn't help also that you know, many people who criticize him jump to like hyperbolic criticism. So like, you know, calling him genocidal or murderous, or, you know, completely wanting to eliminate Muslims. And
Yeah.
so I think there's a fair way to critique him and to challenge him, and that would probably more likely get heard than these criticisms you often hear. So it's like a mishmash of issues that's causing this polarization.
Right. Well, it's like one of the things I've noticed, just having paid attention to, you know, the 2016 election and politics of late. If you call out racism or sexism, it's almost inevitable that it makes things worse in a way. People respond to it so negatively.
Yeah, but what are you supposed to do? Not call it out, especially now? No, I think you're supposed, like how we've always said, let's ridicule bad ideas out of existence. If that goes for religion, then that goes for racism, nationalism, sexism too.
Yeah.
But people are not willing to extend it to that because somehow they start getting defensive. So let's talk about Douglas Murray, for example. I listened to an interview that he did with an Australian right-wing guy called Andrew Bolt, where he was talking about how even the nicest, most pro-British Muslims, you can't be sure and comfortable because their kids might turn out, their future kids might turn out to be terrorists. Now that's in no way a rational concern. It's ludicrous to worry about someone's unborn children being horrible or dangerous. As stupid as me not helping an injured white person on the street because their child might turn out to be a white supremacist murderer.
Right. Well, I guess if you're thinking about like his sort of thought process on that and how I would say the Sam Harris fans would respond to that, to play the devil's advocate, I think what they would say is, if you're just going to do a statistical probability analysis, someone who's Muslim, their kids are more likely to be an ISIS supporter. And everyone could agree with that, right?
Sure, but that's not how you that's not how you discuss human beings. Like the statistical analysis wise, someone who's white, their kids are more likely to be a white supremacist as well.
Right.
Doesn't mean I go around being suspicious of all white people being racist.
Right. Well, it's a I think that's what I was saying before. It does a certain amount of violence to someone. It's tantamount to racism or xenophobia, or
I would stay away from saying like it does violence to someone.
Well, it does. It's an act of
bigotry.
Yeah, it's an act of making an assumption about someone that you wouldn't want made about you based on your immutable characteristics.
Right. So it's just like classic bigotry. And then we have
whatever it is. You wouldn't want someone assuming that you're this way because you're gay, because you're a woman, because your ancestors were from Russia. You know, you don't want anything like that. When you do that to someone, you're doing something that's wrong.
Right. You know? And I say that to even the, extreme left people that will sometimes generalize people because they're white or because they're men. I mean, I think it's wrong all around.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's like that basic premise. You'll see people online who are, these people who talk about they're sort of on the left, they're liberals, they're, and they won't understand that basic element of generalizing about people based on their national origin or I think their religion includes in this, is wrong.
Well, you see, there was a line, and I mean, I admit, even I was kind of buying into this at one point, or maybe it was just the political climate was different, so it made more sense to say that, like, Islam is not a race. There are people that, go around saying that everything that you criticize Islam for is racist, right? So there is a legitimate frustration there, right? Of constantly being called racist, even if you're of Muslim background, just because you're criticizing Islam. So then this whole, like, Islam is not a race. Obviously, people that are Muslim are white, black, brown, and from all over. But to keep hammering this on now in the Trumpian climate, when people are killing brown people, whether they're Muslim or not, just because they're perceived to be Muslim, it makes no sense to me. You know, it just seems unnecessarily pedantic and strange.
Well, whatever people say about Muslims as a group, if you said the same thing about Jews as a group, it would sound to most Americans, it would sound blatantly anti-Semitic, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, there are different concerns when it comes to fundamentalist Jews versus fundamentalist Muslims. Like, Jews are a tiny percentage of Muslims. It's, you know, how many millions of Jews are there? It's not a lot of people, but, you know, and there's not the same like ISIS or whatever. So like, put that to one side. But when you say someone's Muslim, a lot of what you're doing is you're saying that they're from a certain tribe in Nigeria, they're from Pakistan, you know, a lot of what you're doing is embedded in that is their background.
Yeah.
And what we tend to do is we tend to talk about the Muslim community like we talk about the Black community or the Jewish community.
Right, they do get racialized in a way, right?
Yeah, and it's also it is problematic the way that the religion becomes a race in people's mind, because what happens is that the people who speak for Muslims often are the most religious fundamentalist people, and it does us such disservice, I think.
Absolutely, and I blame a lot of left-wing media for this too. Whenever they're portraying a Muslim or writing a story, it has to be a hijab-centered one, or, you know, they're not propping up the right voices. And so the right jumps on that and becomes really like, I don't know, almost frothing at the mouth at any depiction of a woman in hijab, because yes, the left has made some mistakes. But so then now we get these shrieky far-righters seizing that opportunity.
Yeah, I think of myself, you know, I'm half Jewish. And everyone in my Jewish family is basically an atheist for the most part. If the Jewish community was represented by Hasidic rabbis,
yeah,
it would be ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not representative.
I mean, I think Ali Rizvi has the Atheist Muslim book, right? And that's kind of the same idea as the way we talk about Jews, right? We're not talking about Judaism necessarily.
Yeah, but you have to see how much that title upsets people, like, on both sides. Like, it upsets a lot of right-wing atheists too. Like, you can't be both, you gotta pick a side. You know? It's like, dude, just relax and try to understand what's is here.
I guess it comes back to that idea of identity politics, right? People get so angry about identity politics, but it's because they don't want people to have identities that they're threatened by and they're afraid of, right?
Well, yeah, and it's so cherry picky, this anti-identity politics people, right? Like,
oh my God,
conservatives love identity politics, even like, you know, ex-Muslims who are all against identity politics. The ex-Muslim movement is identity politics. Any sort of minority like fighting for their rights based on the fact that they're discriminated for a certain identity politics.
Right.
So,
well,
I mean,
identity
politics can be misused, obviously, to silence people for whatever reason, and that's what shouldn't happen.
Right. Well, it's one of those terms that's so nebulous that you basically just use it as a bludgeon for people you don't like, and you totally are down with using it for yourself, because the people who are the Dave Rubin guests, like the Lauren Southern, she's all about the white race, the Western civilization white race. That is her, you know, she's trying to, that's her entire output.
Right. Didn't she plug identitarianism on Rubin's show? And Rubin was like, yeah, okay, you know, Mr. I hate identity politics, but I'm a gay Jew.
It has identity in the name, Dave. It has it in the name.
As a gay man, you know.
Yeah, well, it's
the last liberal.
The tokenism is another element of it, but you know, you have to talk about identities, right? Identities are a part of who we are, you know, and they're there is an American identity, there is a Canadian identity, and it's not about your race. And you have to be able to talk about it, I think, in a more of a positive way. That I think some of the left has sort of neglected this. And, we have to be able to talk about what does it mean to be an American, a Brit, a Canadian, and
absolutely, yeah, it's important.
And it does mean something. It's not meaningless. There is a culture to being American. There is values. You believe in a equality to a certain extent. You believe in freedom. You believe that you have sort of the work ethic and sort of belief in what it means, like hard work as an American. There's a lot of
I think especially in times like now when Trump is sort of destroying your country, it could be helpful to reassert what it means to be American and all those values that you just talked about, right?
Well, it's a conversation we always have to have, and it has to be had in some sense. And if you don't have it, it gets hijacked by the people who are the extreme people who are willing to say, I'm American, I'm a white American Christian,
USA, yeah.
And it to me, like if being American requires that I'm white, it excludes people in my family who aren't white. If it requires being Christian, it excludes me. If it requires that I'm, a conservative Christian Republican, it totally excludes me. And I feel this is where I grew up. It's not including yourself in that. It feels like a violation of who I am that it's being abused like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where the left, I think, in some ways has abdicated talking about what it means to be American because they're so afraid that it's going to be talked about in this, racist way, or in this.
Yeah, but I think some of that is coming back now. Like, there's a lot of like pro-diversity American stuff going on, and let me just say, I'm happy to criticize the left. Like, that was something that I used to focus on before because I didn't really see the right as being relevant. And I mean, the criticisms are so obvious. Like, why bother? Like, nobody buys into that crap.
Yeah, well,
now it's like more and more people buy into that crap. That's what's hip. That's what's trendy. So it's time to shift. But when I feel comfortable that I'm, with another liberal and not someone that will jump on my, criticisms of the left to sort of score points for the right, I'm happy to.
Right. Well, it's also just it's not even a right or left issue to an extent, because the problem with the Dave Rubins of the world, let's say, is not that they're politically conservative. It's not that they're, they have conservative political beliefs. It's that they have these political beliefs that are on the far right and are this new form of identity politics that's incredibly offensive and grounded in conspiracy theories and hatred, and it's that, and it's claiming to be on the left.
Right.
While being on the right.
So many layers of what's wrong with that. It's not just like, your average, normal, regular conservatism, which I am not a fan of anyway, but it's so much more than that.
Right. Well, you're not saying that nobody can be on the right. I'm hearing a little echo myself.
Yeah, I can hear that as well. Do you have earphones on?
I do. All right.
All right. And also the anti-collectivism, like how Dave said that, the left judges people in groups and the right, judges people individually. That's while he's literally, judging them as a group and calling them the regressive left, he's making this claim. It's so strange and so hypocritical.
Yeah.
Yeah. The right judges Muslims as a group all the time.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what they're doing, and they're also doing that for black folk, for
Yeah.
who identify as feminists, people who identify as liberal or on the left, and they're sort of putting words in their mouth constantly.
Right. So if we're honest, like, you know, different groups pick different groups to judge that way.
Yeah, and
if you want to criticize them, then criticize everyone.
Yeah, well, I mean, with Rubin, for example, I don't have if he was talking about, you know, being on the right and and being pro-Trump and, you know, not calling himself a liberal, while, you know, we have this gigantic healthcare bill that's going to kill thousands of people and take away health insurance from 23 million people. And, you know, if in the context of Trump and all that era, and you're calling yourself on the left and you're not opposing any of that stuff.
Well, in fact, you go on and say, what has he done that's indefensible?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, that kind of this rank dishonesty. Yeah,
dishonesty is very, very, very upsetting.
Well, and it's also, it happens to sort of coalesce with this sort of new media we have, where there are these independent media outlets who can sort of gain traction, gain a platform by being intensely negative and catering to a very small group, and, you know, getting Patreon contributions.
And let me tell you, like, as an ex-Muslim, you have to actively resist that. Otherwise, I mean, it's so easy. The path is so easy. You know, have a jerk off anti-Islam session and collect the Patreon dollars, go on Rebel Media, go on Breitbart, and, you know, talk about how Islam is bad, and you are set. Or go on Rubin, hey.
Well, I think in this sort of social media world, you can figure out, you know, to a science, what is the most popular thing to say. And it is almost like a compulsion to say the thing that will get you likes, retweets, and Patreon donations, right?
Right, but why is it not a compulsion for me?
Well, it's because you have principles, right?
Those damn principles. Keeping me poor.
Yeah, I mean, and it does make sense if you are a profit maximizing person. You know, you have no scruples. You're going to say whatever is going to make you money, and that's how a lot of the media operates, right? That's how CNN operates. They're trying to make money.
Yeah,
they're trying to make money for their shareholders, and if you act like a profit maximizing corporation,
yeah, but you're a person. You're not a corporation. But yeah, there are people who act like that.
Well, if you are just out there to make money, you're going to be openly dishonest, and you're going to cater to the lowest common denominator, like you're a tabloid, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, what we ask, what we sort of hope for in people who are commentators or journalists or writers is that they're willing to tell us their opinion, unfiltered by, you know, what they hope we want to hear. You know, it becomes that sort of echo chamber of just telling people exactly what they want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think you see that from, you know, the sort of the social media environment is so toxic, I think, to, you know, the sort of public debate we're having. I mean, it's one of those problems that it's going to take a lot of work and effort to sort of sort it all out, because it's economic, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And here's where I despair. Like, it ends up putting me in a position where I'm having to, you know, sort of take the side that's like, yo, why are you to hate on Islam? It's a very uncomfortable position for me, because I already really dislike the religion. I don't want to be the one to inject principles and say, I'll rein people in. And you know what I mean? It's like, but ultimately, if you actually want your criticisms of the damn religion to be heard, you are not going about, you're only being heard by the right this way. Sure, you're getting higher and higher numbers of followers, money.
Right. Well, it does come back down to a long range thinking about what is the practical way to have a decent conversation about something.
Right, and but then you're not interested in having a decent conversation with the people you should be having it with if you're selling out to the right, if you're supporting the Muslim ban, if you're hanging out with Rubin, who chills out with, you know, Cernovich, and you're cool with, like, that rape apologetics thing. You're cool to turn turn away, turn a blind eye. But, you know, any, you know, hijabi that's wearing her hijab is going to get you all pissed off about misogyny. I really can't take you seriously as a commentator on misogyny because you're not consistent.
Right. Well, there is a much more effective way to talk about this that gets through to people who are on the liberal, you know, side, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're talking about the problems with fundamentalist Islam and you make the distinction and you say, you know, here's this guy. You know, I saw someone tweeting about the preacher, the imam at the mosque in my neighborhood in Brooklyn. And this guy was talking about how what you should do, you should cut people's hands off if they steal. The punishment for adultery is this if they're not married, and this if they're married, and saying all this vile, you know, barbaric stuff. If you're going to criticize that, you're going to get a lot more people who are on your side. If you're going to criticize the idea of these brown foreign hordes who are rampaging,
raping their way across the world.
Yeah, and you're sort of arguing that Sweden has become, you know, a Muslim no-go hellscape, and then people are not really going to pay attention to you, and they're going to dismiss you as a lunatic.
Right? Is the perfect example, right? Linda Sarsour. There's so many real, legitimate criticisms to make of her.
Yeah.
But then people go around, you know, compare Hitler or you know, call her an Islamist. And so many of those critics of hers are actual racists, actual, you know, white nationalists and stuff. It gets lost because people are like, oh my gosh, there's so many bigots criticizing Linda Sarsour, which is true, but there's also legitimate criticism.
Well, I find her to be sort of the Dave Rubin of the left because
yeah, exactly.
She's this woman who's she claims to be on the left, and she goes to these conferences where everyone else is basically a
far righter.
Yeah, they believe exactly what, you know, the Saudi Arabian government enacts in their country is the right thing to do, right? I mean, it's hard to sort of say it just like that, but that's kind of what they believe, right?
Yeah, she's the sanitizer for Islamic far right, shady, awful figures, and Rubin is the sanitizer for you know, Western American far right figures.
Well, just sort of like help me sort of like sort this out, right? Because there are these people who go to the Islamic Society of North America conference, and you look up what they believe, and it's essentially what they would teach you in like Saudi Arabian seminary school, right? And it's what's called Salafi, or
I don't know if it's at least Salafi because it's
well, it's
progressive, but yes, ultimately they have the same bullshit underneath.
Well, but
like I think they mask it a bit better than that. Like they, you know, wrote this piece about my children's book about how they were bullied by the school board because the school board like forced this gay literature upon their children. And but they did it in this very crafty way. Like, you know, we're not bigoted at all. And, you know, we would love the opportunity to teach our kids about this sort of diversity just when we're ready. But you can see the homophobic undertones throughout the whole thing. Yeah. So but I think they might scrub it a bit.
I would just sort of want to make the distinction that there is a view among a lot of Muslim Americans who aren't the religious clergy of their, you know, or our religious clergy are more liberal and more forward thinking. But the average Muslim American does not have the same views as the imams that Linda Sarsour is speaking to. And
yeah, no, absolutely not. No.
Yeah.
And maybe Linda Sarsour doesn't have those views, but she's happy to turn, you know, blind eye to them.
Right. Just like if you are a Christian, the average Christian American has very liberal views about, you know, a lot of things. You know, they're probably, maybe some of them are anti-abortion, but many of them are, you know, pro-choice. And
yeah,
if they went to a Christian fundamentalist conference, they would have a lot of problems with, you know, the average Christian would have a lot of problems with, you know, the most fundamentalist Christian, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to what the ISNA conferences are like though, because I haven't ever been. I'd love to go on like some secret and check those out. I have always wanted to, but I don't know. I'm just weirded out by actually going. Yeah, so I suspect it's not like a fundamentalist conference. It may have elements of that, but overall, it's probably packaged as a more modern, progressive. Like I've known some pretty liberal Muslims who are like, attending ISNA stuff.
Right, right.
And I don't know. I don't know what goes on in there. So I don't know if there's like
I know
preaching or.
Right. Well, when I lived in Minnesota, we had this congressman, Keith Ellison, who's Muslim, but he is very liberal. He's pro-gay rights. Like after gay marriage passed in Minnesota, he did a video where he sung a song about it on his guitar.
Yeah, Robert Spencer does not like him very much, as he said on my podcast.
Yeah, well,
able to take the oath on his holy book.
I've met Keith Ellison. I saw him operate as a politician. He is as liberal and great as any religious person I know who's on the left and liberal. Him being Muslim, it's immaterial as far as I'm concerned. I don't care, But
I mean, they say he has some shady ties, right? But he's spoken at some shady conferences or whatever. Right. But as a politician, wouldn't you pander to a bunch of people, right? As a Muslim politician.
He thought about going. I think he was set up to go to speak at an ISNA conference, and he canceled.
Okay.
The last minute. So obviously, not everyone who goes to speak there is condoning the views of every other person who speaks on the platform. Because you get into that sort of guilt by association, then it's a bit too much. But it seems to me that if your career is being made on the circuit of talking at on the same
conferences
at the same stage as people who, let's say, believe that homosexuality is immoral.
Right, and if you consider them allies and you're not challenging them, then sure. But if you're actually standing up there and saying, "Well, no, I challenge these views," then that's different. But I'm sure Linda doesn't.
Right, and it's obviously you have people who are part of your community in some sense, but they have views that you don't like at all. There's Jewish people who are super conservative and have all kinds of beliefs that I would hate. But so I do understand that point of it, but I think it's sort of the dishonesty and unwillingness to criticize the right-wing beliefs in your own community or
Well, wasn't there an ISNA conference recently where pro-LGBT Muslims were booted out?
Right.
I don't know the whole story, but something like that happened, and Linda's only comment was, "Well, we can disagree with people, and still talk to them." I don't know.
Yeah, I saw some tweet about that, but I'm not up on that. But
I'm not so sure what happened there.
Yeah, but there is some way to criticize Linda Sarsour and say, hey, you're part of the left, and one of the basic bedrock values of people who are on the left is that they believe that homosexuality, sexual orientation is it's not a moral issue. There's nothing wrong with being gay. And I think
she's come out pro LGBT, hasn't she? She's supported that cause publicly, if I remember correctly.
Well, I think there's a lot of these sort of parsing of words, right? People will say, I support equal rights under the law, but my religious views are personal.
Okay, yeah. I don't know if it was something half-assed like that.
I would be very surprised if she said that being gay was totally normal and kids should be told that being gay is fine.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure she wouldn't go as far as telling kids that's the ultimate. That's why I'm so hated.
Yeah,
because I'm corrupting children.
Well, I mean, that's like the Dan Savage "It Gets Better" campaign, right? And that it's so important, to tell teenagers that they're not who they are is not immoral or wrong or whatever. It's one of the most decent things.
And even younger.
Oh yeah, well, kids need to know that that there's nothing wrong with that, because it's so psychologically damaging to people to grow up thinking that their sexual orientation is
right. And in terms of bullying, kids need to be told that it's not okay to treat someone horribly for being different.
Right. So, when I hear her basically say that, people who run Salafi Muslim conferences or organizations like, are great examples of Islam, and you should listen to them. And you're also on the stage with Bernie Sanders with all these left-wing people. There is a contradiction there. And if you're going to criticize, the people on the left who are being sort of wishy-washy on that, that would be a much better criticism than saying, we don't want Muslims in our country because they're going to like breed and destroy us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, how do you, like, if the left is being wishy-washy on that, how like we have this trend of people blaming everything like this on the left. Oh, the left didn't deal with the topic of Islam properly, which there's a kernel of truth to, but you cannot like excuse everything, like Katie Hopkins or Tommy Robinson, that these are like the monsters the left has created. No, I don't.
Well, it gives them no agency.
I think they're horrible, those monsters themselves. Of course, there are grievances and there are things that haven't been properly addressed by the left as well. But this kind of excuse making seems to only go one way. Like, oh, the left is responsible for Trump. Well, people who hate these extreme SJWs who are like policing people for hairstyles or for eating tacos or selling tacos or whatever, why don't you make excuses for them and say that, extreme racism or extreme sexism has caused them to be extreme in this way, and, they're the monsters created by the right. Like, I don't see anybody.
Or say that ISIS is justified because of U.S. foreign policy.
Right. It's a similar kind of excuse making, right? I mean, of course, there are grievances on all sides. I'm sure even like, certain things make kids vulnerable to being radicalized by ISIS or being radicalized by Richard Spencer. And I'm not equating the two. Yes, he doesn't behead anyone. But yeah. I mean, left propaganda going around.
Well, it's amazing just how parallel the lines of argument are, and how self-refuting that people will make an argument, that they decry when the left makes it, and they'll apply it to themselves and have no sort of awareness of what they're doing. It's kind of funny sometimes, right?
Yeah. It's funny if it weren't so sad and so frustrating and affecting us all.
But it comes down to, you have to take responsibility for what you yourself do.
Yeah, of course. You can't look for some other root cause. And the first response is to hold the person accountable for their own vile views. And secondary, you can go around and look at the things that might have increased chances of this happening and stuff like that. But the first thing is to hold these vile people accountable for their own views.
Right. Well, there's this view of like everyone on the left is like this elite, this powerful elite who controls the world, and everyone on the right is, this common, regular, average American, Joe the plumber. And then you come to find out that the people on the right are like the Koch brothers and the rich people. Actually, if you look at the voting breakdown, Hillary Clinton won voters who are poor, and Trump won voters who make more than $250,000, $100,000 a year. So it's one of those narratives that people wheel out that has no basis in reality whatsoever. It's like these left-wing elites control every single institution, and obviously they don't control the government, do they? It's the most powerful institution in our country, and they have.
Yeah. And that's the thing about the obsession with SJWs and college campuses that really bothers me. Is like, it's so disproportionate. It's an obsession with some campus kids and a path for what the president is doing over and over again. Like, so many people are like, oh, well, why should I criticize them? Everyone else is criticizing him. Well, that's bullshit. Everyone else is criticizing Islam in this circle as well, and that doesn't stop you from hammering away at Islam.
Right. Well, it's one of those things where people say, you know, they'll downplay any sort of problem on their side. And then, you know, college campuses tend to be like the academic institutions of our country are the one big thing, you know, not big business, not government, but academia is the one big institution that is controlled by people on the left. More so. Obviously not completely, because there's BYU and there's every math department, every economics department is not full of, you know, communists, right? Mm-hmm. But it's the big cultural institution that is liberal. And people focus on that this insane degree sort of suddenly because, oh wait, we used to hit on Obama, but Obama's gone, so we have to find these new targets. And it's amazing, like people like Dave Rubin will just sort of shrug off anything that Trump says, and then
or just not make a comment about things like, you know, Milo's child abuse endorsing scandal, or, you know, just like, oh, bye guys, I'm off the grid for a few days, and, you know.
Yeah, well, it's a fun tactic he uses, but it's this thing of, you know, like left-wing anarchist, like street punks, and college campuses are now the most powerful institutions in our entire society. Suddenly,
well, many of those anarchists hate liberals themselves, so I don't see why they're like, you know, all of a sudden representatives of the left.
I went to college in St. Paul, where they had their Republican convention in 2008. So I talked to a bunch of these like anarchist protesters, like the black people who were at the convention to protest, and their views on the world, like they hated me as much as they hated John McCain and Sarah Palin. Maybe more.
Yeah. That's the thing. Many of them think that, you know, liberals are like too right wing. Something.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, if you actually go out and talk to people who are Democrats, who are normal people, they are not the insane, you know, left-wing nuts who get portrayed on, you know, from the Michael Shermer, Dave Rubin.
Yeah, absolutely. Hillary wasn't running on a, you know, let's stop white people from eating tacos campaign. Meanwhile, Donald Trump was like running with many alt-right talking points.
Yeah, it's kind of, you know, like I live in a black neighborhood in Brooklyn here, and I talk a lot of politics with, you know, black people in my neighborhood and, you know, the gym or whatever. And the views the average person has in, you know, in the black community, as far as I can, in my experience, are totally moderate, normal, defensible positions. There isn't this idea of like white people are the devil and we need to destroy white privilege. Like, I never feel like people don't like me because I'm white. And I, you know, that attitude is so sort of confined to like a few problematic and like Evergreen State University, maybe not. It's not the entire country, and that sort of lack of proportion is.
Yeah, it's fear mongering, right? Like, and so many atheists have and ran with this right wing propaganda. It's so depressing. Let's talk about Michael Shermer for a second. You know, leading skeptic, you know, Mr. Skeptic magazine. He's so depressing. Like,
I find him so insane. He's insane. Oh my God.
It's like, I mean, what did he say about fucking Stefan Molyneux? Podcaster, one of the finest podcasters for Reason. Hell.
Well, Stefan Molyneux, he is part of the Trump right. He is one of the public intellectuals of the Trump right. If you were creating like the four horsemen of the Donald Trump, like people who are between the age of like 15 and 30, who are like right-wing extremists, who are a lot of the fan base of Rubin, it would be like Molyneux, Paul Watson, you know, who else? Milo, you know, Sargon of Akkad, that guy.
Though he denies like supporting Trump or something. But yeah, Stefan, well, let's just, you know, all you have to do is look at his YouTube videos, his Twitter.
It's conspiracy theories, and
it's full of insanity.
Michael Shermer's like whole career is like, I'm a skeptic who debunks conspiracy theories, and Stefan Molyneux is a guy who pushes conspiracy theories. Like,
and he thinks he's the finest podcaster for a reason. What the fuck?
Did he have like an ice pick lobotomy at some point? It's completely
everyone? What happened?
It's insane. I mean, the conspiracy theory element of it is, I find it so infuriating, because people like Sam Harris and Shermer and all these guys will go on Joe Rogan's podcast, which is like one of the biggest platforms for.
But okay, let's make a distinction though. Sam is not pushing Stefan.
But people will totally tolerate. It's socially acceptable to talk to people who are Seth Rich truthers, who are talking about Pizzagate.
I don't know what goes on with Joe Rogan and why he's so popular and why so many skeptics are okay. Is it just the size of the platform that matters, not how you use it? Like,
well, it's pretty remarkable, because if you look at like the top 25 podcasts, most of them are like NPR has their podcast of, Serial, and that's super successful. But Joe Rogan is just some guy. He's just some, comedian who is independently creating a show. And if you add up his like YouTube plus iTunes downloads and listens, he's one of the biggest talk shows in America. I think probably more people listen to Joe Rogan than maybe, Conan O'Brien or something, who has a network, or not network, but cable talk show. Don't you think so? I would bet so. Like, that's my.
I don't know. I mean, it's disturbing how much following that. Crazy.
I was doing some research actually, and if you look at like the Google Trends, like graph of a lot of these far right people, like Peterson, Molyneux, a lot of these conspiracy theorists, their biggest bumps in their sort of internet following will be a Joe Rogan appearance. Like they're not very famous, and then Joe Rogan invites them on, and they're like, "Whoop!" They've ascended a level of followers and attention. Like Gad Saad, for example, he's been on Joe Rogan's show like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. Despite the fact that what is wrong with people that they can even stand this man? It's hard to tolerate him.
Like, he makes it so obvious though. He's not like sneaky or shady like Ruben.
Well, look at his Twitter. The man is unhinged.
It's painful. He refers to himself in the third person constantly as the Godfather. How do you tolerate someone like that? It's not,
Well, I guess you could think of it as like, it's like a goofy stage persona or something. But it's
sure. But after you've done it like for the 500th time, talking about how good looking you are, and you're like constantly tweeting selfies of yourself from 30 years ago that are not relevant anymore.
Yeah, it's like you're so like childish in your insults of everyone. Like, how many people has he tweeted about their like testicles? Like
and these are this is one of our leading skeptics. You know what I mean? I don't understand. He's
yeah. Oh, he also promotes people who are like neo-Nazis. Like, people who are talking about the Jewish question and the Jews control the media.
So I really don't want these critics of, atheism or new atheism to be right, but they are being proven right when people are allying with actual racists and bigots, actual racists, actual neo-Nazis, actual people who, promote white genocide type crap. Why? Why are you proving people right all the time? I don't understand. What?
Yeah, you have to just marvel as the world has gone crazy.
Like people used to say when people had really reasonable criticisms of Islam, just like, the peak of that was that Bill Maher and Ben Affleck and Sam Harris. I wrote this letter to Sam Harris that became like, crazy viral. And I was completely on board. Like, I thought that Ben Affleck was being unreasonable and stopping a conversation that needed to happen, and completely stand by that. But since then, something has happened. Like, obviously, you know, criticism of Islam is not racism, not bigoted, not gross and racist. But now there's a lot of people allying with gross racists. So what the hell has happened?
Yeah, well, it seems like some of these just social norms of just decent conversation and debate, and like if it used to be that if you were a conspiracy theorist, you would be laughed out of the public sphere, right? You wouldn't get invited on CNN.
Yes. I miss those days. I miss when we could just like make fun of creationists and laugh about, you know, how silly that stuff is. Why am I having to like debunk white genocide now? Why am I having to like prove to someone that
there are these,
genocide?
but the racism angle of it is maybe more important. There is this social taboo about racism that's very strong. And some people use it as a bludgeon when it doesn't really apply. We can agree on that. But there is a social taboo about racism for a very real reason. And racism is itself a huge problem. And it is, in and of itself, being racist is a bad thing to do. It's really bad. And you should really try not to be racist. Like, right? That sort of social,
but
that social ethic is missing from a lot of these people who are the rational, skeptic, atheist, you know, cohort.
I think because many people were called racist for the wrong, maybe that contributed to it, and now actual racism slides in without caring.
And I think that there is even a duty to not to speak about race in a very sensitive,
well, especially now,
thoughtful way, and communicate that the basic thing that because of someone's skin color, you don't view them as a different, you know, species, a different type of the other. You don't otherize them. You sort of have this human solidarity with every single other person, where you love them for being a human being. And
isn't that what humanism is supposed to be about? But like, it shocks me how many people have humanists in their Twitter bio and want to like murder Muslims.
Yeah, or they don't want to live near them, and they don't. I mean, you know, I think I'm sort of like very lucky that I live in New York City, because you're constantly exposed to all these people from all around the world.
Yeah.
And you see who they are. You see them, you know, face to face.
Yeah, but come on, like, do you think Dave Rubin isn't exposed in LA? Come on, he is, but he's still buying into this.
Yeah, but to me, it's such a beautiful sort of illustration. You see these people, they're human beings just like you. You know, it's not sort of grasping. Like, there is a version of it where you sort of say like, everything's the same, everyone's the same, all ideas are fine. Let's just treat let's not think about anything. That's a way that can be, you know, a way of stopping critical conversations about things. But there is a basic kernel of human solidarity that everyone needs to constantly make sure that they're remembering to apply to other people. And just because there are people on the left or the right who are abusing a term, it doesn't mean that you have free range to do the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is something just missing, I think, in a lot of, there's like a lack of responsibility of people knowing that their audiences are these impressionable people who can get sort of angry and sidetracked and unaware of what the consequences of what they believe are.
Yeah, and that's what's worrying. Like,
yeah, because you know, I don't think the majority of people who are Sam Harris listeners are racist people, but you do notice a lot of them are.
Well, do you remember when he was kind of debating with Cernovich and stuff on Twitter, and then he tweeted this thing like, I thought it was great that he did that, and I wish he did more of that. Like, if you have like a Pepe avatar and you use cuck unironically, just block me, you know?
Yeah. Well, I guess there's also that there's a basic sort of cultural, like, where do you stand politically? Right? A lot of politics is you build a coalition of people. You build a coalition of people who are like-minded and have the same values as you. And if you think the people who have the same values as you are the people who have Nazi imagery on a frog,
but come on, they're just shit posting, bro. They're just like having some lols.
Yeah, well, it's like, oh yeah, I'm just an awful person because it's funny.
I'm just ironically, genocidal.
Yeah, I mean I find that argument to be
like, hasn't Dave like defended the alt-right?
He did a whole video about it. He did a whole
video there you go. Yeah, it's like, and Jordan Peterson, okay, this guy who criticizes the postmodern leftists, he couldn't even.
He starts
talk
crying
about the meaning of truth. He would start crying about the loss of faith in a stupid New Year's Eve video that he did. And there are so many atheists championing this lunatic, right? I mean, 5 years ago, that would be unheard of. We now have a hero who hates atheism and it makes him cry. And he's against casual sex. He's like just your classic conservative, but people seem to think he's something extra special. And he's been on Tara McCarthy's Nazi podcast. I don't say Nazi lightly. Like,
she's a Nazi. She's
an actual Nazi who's advocated for violence towards non-white people who are refusing to leave this future hypothetical white ethno state. She said you can shoot them, you can whatever.
Jordan Peterson, he's a cultural conservative, right? He's partially it's Christian, but it's cultural conservatism, right? It's social conservatism.
Yeah, he's disturbed by all the casual sex he sees on campus.
Yeah, well, he's like, you kids get off my lawn.
He basically, why is that hip? Why is that cool?
Well, if you think about it, there is this sort of idea that like whatever you do that's not the traditional norm, whatever that's great. And that's sort of that's not really true. Like, obviously, like,
So my parents are like liberal Muslims, so I should just rebel against them and be conservative Muslim. Mom, I'm putting on the hijab whether you like it or not, okay?
Yeah, well, but there is this sort of idea, like, just whatever like the traditional culture is, rebel from that. And that's like kind of like an adolescent viewpoint, and it's the viewpoint of people who are super radical and kind of weird. And like, obviously there's like an aspect to being culturally conservative, socially conservative, that's good. Like, don't abuse drugs is a good culturally conservative viewpoint, right? Not
if it goes into like, supporting the incarceration of people for like, having a joint on them or something.
Oh, sure. But like, don't, abuse opium and heroin, and, don't drink so much alcohol that it affects your life in negative ways, right? Be like,
sure, yeah. It sounds like my dad is talking to me, but yeah.
No, but like there are things that are sort of like moderation, and
obviously, like, I don't think that liberals support destroying your liver by binge drinking every day or anything.
Right. Well, like, everyone has a different.
It's just a responsible viewpoint, I think.
Yeah, but it is, it's like a traditional value, right? In some sense, it is.
I guess so, but it's also just being responsible.
Yeah, well, you could say the same, but what Jordan Peterson is doing is he's sort of taking, the craziness of a few people and sort of using it as an argument for social conservatism that is wacky and crazy.
Sure,
and
yeah. I heard him lecture on like, whether the women's movement was beneficial for the Western civilization at all or not, and are women really happy now because.
Well, a lot of those things, like, that's social conservatism, and it's not part of a liberal revolt against the far left. It's not. It's social conservatism, and it's something you can have a conversation about feminism, right? Because feminism was a great social movement for people, right? We can all agree on that. Or you and I can agree on that.
You and I can agree on that. The thousands of endless, repetitive, boring anti-feminist channels and their viewers certainly don't agree.
Right. But at the same time, feminism had negative impacts on American society in some ways. Just as a for example, when the average elementary school teacher in 1970, a lot more of them were smart, really smart women. Because today, the woman who was told you can only become a public school teacher, that's your top aspiration, now they're told you can do whatever you want. And I think that's the right thing, because a lot of brilliant women who were born in 1920 never got to live the life they should have been able to lead or choose what they wanted to do. But at the same time, the women who are now, college professors and lawyers and investment bankers, that is a loss of talent to the public school system.
Sure, but I mean, we still have standards in the public school system.
Right,
IQ has consistently been rising, right?
Right, but
so I don't think
but I think that you could say well, it's on the whole, it's a social change that's been incredibly positive. But there are little things where you could say, well, this is an unintended consequence.
Well, I mean, you can phrase it like that, I guess, but I mean, there's also ways of phrasing that positively and also debunking, right? Like as I said, the IQ is just rising and rising, and our standards are improving.
Or you take the Jordan Peterson kind of people. They think that the only way to raise kids is that you have a nuclear family with a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of insane, because that never existed in the world until, the 19th century or the 20th century, when because people lived with their entire family, their grandparents, they lived in multi-generational households, and kids worked when they were 8 years old, and the traditional American nuclear family is not some sort of thing that was handed down from Mount Sinai that tells people how to live, right?
Yeah.
But there are beneficial aspects to having one parent who's a stay-at-home, person.
Sure, yeah, but that's not to say that women should, I don't know, should be take away their voting and reinforce the patriarchy and bullshit like that libtard America makes videos about.
So I think you can talk to people like Jordan Peterson and sort of talk to them about how, okay, I understand what you're talking about. You're a social conservative, but on the whole, it's a benefit to society that we've had feminism, that we've had the sexual revolution where people can have casual sex and they're not sort of so repressed.
He wouldn't agree. He'd start weeping, Alex.
Oh yeah, he'd do it all. But that's a legitimate conversation to have, and what the proper way to live your life is a big conversation that people will always be having. It's always a conversation about what's the best way to live your life.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the people who are, talking about this are turning that whole conversation into either you're a postmodernist 19-year-old student who hates everything about the West and is a Marxist and a Islamist Marxist, and hates everyone who's not transgender. You're either that person or you're a rational liberal skeptic who wants to bring back, 1950s America.
Right, very rational indeed. But this is what I'm saying. For me as an ex-Muslim, it's so disturbing to see this, because I'm so familiar with this type of shit. I've seen it all before and I left it behind, and here it is again.
I mean, these are the same arguments that Jordan Peterson makes, that a fundamentalist, Christian fundamentalist Muslim is going to make about women and their role.
Absolutely. If they become a little more refined and tone certain things down, they'll just borrow this shit. I already see the overlap between MRAs and Islamists. Islamists love posting these MRA arguments about, how because consent isn't a thing, or if you're married to someone, then you don't need their consent. There's no such thing as marital rape.
Yeah, well, I think the next thing is that people who are anti-SJW, anti-left people are going to say like, our only hope is that we have to become, you know, Salafi fundamentalist Muslims to defeat the left so that we can defeat Islam.
Oh, this will be great. I can't wait for that. Well, don't you see? I think it was Lawrence. Was it Lawrence Southern? They all kind of mesh into one another because their views are all so stupidly the same. It's hard for me to distinguish, but I think it was Lawrence Southern who was kind of like upset at these women wearing like skimpy clothing or something. It's like, what's happening here? Don't you hate Islam for all these reasons?
Well, that's one of those concerns that I don't understand at all. Like, what is the problem with a woman wearing skimpy clothing in public? It's like it's not like she's wearing skimpy clothing to, you know, the Supreme Court or something.
Yeah, no, like, I don't understand what these people's problem is, like, really.
Human beings, like, people see boobs and stuff. It's not like something to be so like worried about.
Well, I mean, them and Islamists will agree that it is.
It's not going to destroy your society to see the human body. It's one of those things of people don't want to engage with all the progress we've made since, you know, the 19th century, Victorian times, with being comfortable and liberal. Like, they're not liberal, they're illiberal. They're against these sort of...
They're illiberal, and yet you see the people that talk about opposing illiberal values are only opposing those values in, you know, Islam. And that's what's most disappointing. And that's what's making it so ineffective. Like, Islam criticism, even you see reformers like Asra Namani, Raheel Reza, who used to respect till recently. She went on Fox News to defend the Muslim ban, and you know, Asra Namani got a whole bunch of media time just because she was like, oh, I'm an immigrant and I'm a Muslim and I'm, you know, I love Trump, and you know, she like defended his misogynistic pussy grabbing talk, and she's like, oh, it's just locker room talk, and she minimized it. And then she has the, you know, she like goes on to criticize how hijabs and segregation in mosques, like, okay, segregation in mosques is bad, hijabs are bad, but you know what is worse? Assaulting people.
Yeah, I mean, her sort of transformation as a figure of the ex-Muslim community is... She's
not ex-Muslim officially, no. She's a reformer.
Okay, excuse me. The progressive Muslim or Muslim reformer community.
Hmm.
It's pretty shocking. I think a lot of people who I think probably like looked at her as a sane, you know, like progressive voice in that world are just like, who are you? This is a different person than I thought I knew.
Yes, and I don't understand the people that have seen this behavior from her and the Soros conspiracies.
Oh my God.
And they still continue to champion her and promote her. I don't understand it. What is happening? There are blinders on, clear blinders, when it's someone in the Islam critical circle. It's like you just cannot see anything wrong with them, even if they have freaking, I don't know, a sign on their face. You just won't be able to see it.
Yeah, well,
critic.
Well, I mean, I guess that reminds me of the whole the controversy about Majid Nawaz.
Yeah, you know, he's someone I've had so much respect for, and you know, I still have a lot of respect for him. I start to disagree with him more and more, and this lawsuit is like...
Yeah, well, I will say, you know, first of all, I will always respect his style. The man is very, very dapper.
Definitely, of course. And you know what? What the SPLC did to him is disgraceful. You know?
The thing that just blows my mind is that they said that he was an anti-Muslim extremist, and part of their evidence was that he went to a strip club.
A strip club? Oh, fucking hell. It was so ridiculous. I'm sorry, I'm swearing a lot. I don't know why. It was... Yeah, it boggles my mind. And you know, the guy that reported him for being at the strip club, he had a Muslim name himself, and he was supposedly the owner of the strip club. What kind of hypocrite is that? You know, so of course I agree that these charges against him are so unjust and so unfair. and he's absolutely in the right to be completely upset about it. You know, I was so angry about it. I posted about it. You know, I support him 100%. But, you know, taking this to court seems ridiculous and a bit censorious. Like, you cannot, as a public figure, try to police people's like, you know, people have called Hillary a pedophile, which is absolutely untrue, and things like that, you know.
She's working with Satan.
Alex
Jones said that. Yeah, it's funny. It's lovely when these like rational skeptic atheists are like talking about witchcraft and Satan. It's like
Alex Jones is an atheist, so is he?
No, but like some of the people are like parroting those same things about, you know, Hillary and Pizzagate and all that sort of stuff. Like
yeah.
It's like, oh my God, it's ridiculous. But it's an interesting point because, you know, I read there's a Pope Hat blog post about this and everything
I read that. He went hard.
I talked to one of my friends who's a lawyer about this, and it seems like in U.S. court, he has no case against the Southern Poverty Law Center. He has absolutely.
Yeah, I've heard at least 2 or 3 other lawyers say that as well.
From what I understand, it's kind of like the U.S. law. It kind of traces what your basic intuitions would be about whether you can sue somebody, and the fact that he's a public figure, and this is basically an opinion about him, a political opinion about someone. You know, you can call someone an extremist, and it's all relative, right?
Well, yeah, it depends on if he's an extremist in your view or not, right? Like some people's threshold for that will be higher, some will be lower, and of course, I disagree with SPLC's characterization, but it is their opinion.
Yeah, well, if someone is a Marxist, they're going to say Obama is a right-wing, free market conservative or something, right? And then if you're on the right, you think Obama is a socialist. You know, it's totally political speech. And the fact is that Maajid Nawaz has a huge platform in the media to say, hey, you're lying about me. This is not who I am.
Right. He's been given many chances. He was on Bill Maher. And I mean, I think one of the criticisms is that he's more interested in fame and popularity or getting attention. And I just don't know if announcing this crowdfunding lawsuit on Bill Maher kind of, I don't know, that just, why is he making those people seem right? I don't.
Well, I think that line of argument I don't buy into that much. But
I don't buy into any of the arguments against him. Like, he's someone that I like and respect.
I think what makes him look worse is the free speech aspect of it.
Oh, absolutely. That's the most disappointing thing of it. He's been someone who stood up consistently, you know, even for people who I think really in situations like, you know, having their Twitter account suspended. It's not a big deal, and it's not really a free speech issue in my mind if like a company like Twitter isn't giving you access to an account over there. So like, you know, he was really upset about Milo being taken off, and even he just defended Richard Spencer. And it's like, well, what? You've talked about how you have to defend speech for especially the worst people that you disagree with. And I mean, he characterizes a lot of people as regressive left. I even seen him post something like, shut the fuck up, regressive left, you know, I don't need your permission to talk about my culture. Well, what if people, you know, according to this precedent that he wants to set, you know, where like you can sue people for calling people racist, Islamophobe, or whatever. What if people start to sue for being called regressive? What if Linda Sarsour sues for being called an Islamist? You know, Dave Rubin tried to do this lawsuit crap with that Josh Harkinson guy.
Yeah, well, it's like appealing to the referee in your political argument you're having in the public sphere, and it doesn't work that way. The government doesn't weigh in and tell you who's right and who's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What has to happen is that the person who has the better arguments will eventually win, or the people who have the better arguments will eventually win. You have to sort of believe in that.
Well, I think a lot of people were on Maajid's side, and SPLC was losing support and donations all the time. And I think that's good proof. That's it right there. I don't think you need to take it to court. Just seems very strange and very not pro free speech.
Well, it's very funny when people say, I'm a free speech absolutist, but I believe I should be able to sue people who incorrectly categorize my political views. And it's
political pronouns.
Well, your political labeling people politically is like the most core free speech thing you could ever have. That's like the center of the center of the center of the First Amendment.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not a famous person, so it doesn't matter, but people have called me an MRA and a feminazi on the same day.
Yeah, I mean, if you're on
Which
Twitter,
is true.
If you're on Twitter, you've probably been called, racist, sexist,
yeah,
and also like a libtard, cuck, etc., etc. Like,
yeah,
you'll get every kind of criticism.
Yeah, and I believe Bajit's been called an Islamist by some of these crazy right-wingers too. Like they think he's a stealth Islamist. So
he has like a group of stalkers who think that he's a stealth Islamist.
Yeah, I've encountered a couple of those.
Converted Sam Harris to Islam or something.
Yeah,
he's a secret mission from Hizbut Tahrir.
Now Sam is secretly, spreading Islam. I don't know how, but that's what he's doing.
Yeah, it's the long game. Hizbut Tahrir is going to support Sam Harris. it's eighth dimensional chess. It's like Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's that's exactly it. And also that there was a recent sort of satire video made by this obviously pretty clueless hijabi American woman who was sort of satirizing ex-Muslims, like, yeah, you want to make it big, you want to make it rich, just like bitch out your former religion, and like, the book deals will come to your door. And a lot of ex-Muslims were so severely offended by this, especially a lot of the Reuben friends. And I don't think it's fair of her to generalize ex-Muslims like this, but it didn't offend me in that way, probably because it doesn't really, doesn't really apply to me.
Well, this does
very wrong to minimize some, the pain of leaving religion and sort of discredit that there could be any valid reason to leave religion. Of course, that goes without saying. But there's a point here that, like, a lot of people in this movement, unfortunately, are looking transparently biased and one-sided when they do go on Fox News, when they do rebel media interviews. It's just cringeworthy. It makes me really embarrassed for this movement that I once, considered so noble and so, I was so proud to be ex-Muslim. It's not the same feeling anymore.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the story that Glenn Loury told. He was this black neoconservative in the 1980s, and he was very popular with the Reagan administration and all these right-wing publications and all that sort of group, because he wasn't like far right, but he was kind of like moderate, and he was talking about a lot of these. He was pushing back against a lot of the sort of left-wing radical black activism of the 70s. And he really had this experience where this book came out, the Bell Curve by Charles Murray.
Totally not racist book.
And he read it and he thought it was very poorly argued, and he wanted to sort of debate him, and Charles Murray refused to debate him and refused to talk about it. And these conservative magazines wouldn't publish his criticisms of Charles Murray, even though they were publishing gigantic, even like centrist liberal magazines were publishing huge symposium, articles about Charles Murray's massive new controversial book. Like, it was this huge sensation. But his conservative allies would not even let him critique it or talk about it. And he sort of felt like, wow, like I'm part of this group of people who really does not value me except for my criticism of black people.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah, I thought these people were my allies, but they're not my allies. They just wanted me as a token representation of why it's okay that they're not racist, and they're not treating me with the respect and the humanity that I deserve, and they never actually like respected me as a human being. And I think he sort of moved a lot more towards the left and sort of changed his views partially because of that, because he realized that there was a real undercurrent of racism in the way his sort of criticism of his own community was being used. And I see a lot of that sort of same parallel here.
Yeah, I mean, I see that too. It's been one of the most heartbreaking revelations for me because it's something I held so dear. It's something I took so much pleasure in, just harshly criticizing the conservatism of my own community. And I felt confident that I was surrounded by people like myself who were liberal, you know, who would oppose this nonsense in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't at all about just opposing Muslims.
Right.
But now, when the tables have turned and there's so many opportunities to criticize this stuff, nobody really comes forth. There are some people who pay like a weak lip service and will say the odd thing, but that's just not, it's not cutting it. And I'm feeling so alienated. I mean, I've gone through this so many times in my life. Like, you know, I felt alienated from the Muslim community. I felt alienated from, like, you know, from the Pakistani community, and never really fully belonging. So you find this group and you think, oh, you know, I finally found people that I have so much in common with. I felt alienated from liberals before because they could not stomach my criticisms of Islam, and I thought that was really unfair because I'm someone who's lived through that. And you know, they've got to give me the same space to speak about how much I detest that conservatism as they joke about, you know, from their Christian conservative backgrounds or whatever. But they couldn't, and so I'm feeling this all over again, and it's like, oh, I don't know. It's sad. It's very sad.
Well, there is something just, I guess, incredibly powerful about being an apostate as a spokesperson, right? Like Ronald Reagan was this apostate he used to be a Democrat, used to be like a liberal Democrat, then he became a Republican, and it was this huge. He was like a Hollywood liberal who became a Republican that like launched his career into and eventually becoming president. You know.
Yeah.
If you say I used to be a liberal, but then I realized I was wrong, it gives you a credibility, and it gives people love to hear that.
They do. Yeah. That's why you have like trans people who hate trans people having really big YouTube channels, and like ex-feminists saying like feminism is bad. And, you know, sadly, that's one of the ways that ex-Muslims get used too. And I refuse to be that. It's so easy to just be that and cash in. It's just so easy. But, you know, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've made a conscious effort to really not have that just like Islam bashing, just like sledgehammering away. Like if I critique Islam, it's like I try to bring in the context of this political climate and how important it is to be sensitive. But it would be just so much like easier to just be like, yeah, you know, these Quran verses suck, and like let's laugh about how silly Muslims are. And
to not understand the politics of it, I think to say that like the politics are totally neutral and I'm going to ignore all politics in what I'm doing, to me it's so naive. It's so politically naive, and it's shrinking from the moment of what we're living in. You know, you're not willing to, you know, go out and, you know, deal with the world as it is. Like if I go down out of my apartment and I walk 2 blocks, there is a little deli where I buy beer or whatever. And the guys who run it are from Yemen. Mm-hmm. And right now their family cannot visit them because there's a travel ban.
Yeah.
These are people I see almost every day. And because of their background, because their religion and their background, their lives are severely messed up by the U.S. government because of anti-Muslim animus.
Yeah.
And it's really unfair, and it is real world people are being hurt. And if you're not going to reckon with that, if you're going to pretend that that's not happening, and you're not going to change what you're saying, or
you have to shift gears. Absolutely. You can't just continue to sledgehammer in the same way as the Ben Affleck era. You just can't.
Well, I think it's being politically naive. Is
not, some of these people, though, are very politically aware and, you know, happy to comment on politics outside, but they don't shift gears on their criticism of Islam. So they keep attracting more right-wing followings. And, you know,
people will say they're totally nonpartisan and they're politically neutral and they won't talk about politics. But it's because of that, they're not actually politically naive. They just realize that if you go on Fox News and you talk about how terrible Trump is, you're not gonna get invited back. You know, if you go on Fox News and you say, I'm a Muslim, but I like Trump, you're gonna get invited back. And it's a fact of life. And if you are censoring yourself and or even unconsciously censoring yourself or changing what you're saying to cater to people who have values that are antithetical to your own or antithetical to what you say you believe, you're doing something that's really wrong.
Yeah.
That's sort of my impression of that situation, right? And it does come down to a lot of this, like 40 years ago, there was no such thing as I'm an activist who gets money from, you know, my Patreon views on this website and my podcast. There wasn't this sort of freewheeling, you know, free market of you know, journalism. Like you got a job at this big company or this big newspaper, or you got a fellowship from this think tank that, you know, was the same political ideology as you, but you had some sort of a freedom to express yourself under that. And there are a lot of problems, a lot of, you know, ethical issues that are similar, but I think that there is this like impact of social media and people understanding how popular they are, that it does infect a lot of these, you know, people in the media.
Yeah, and it's so easy to spread bullshit now. It's so easy. You just cater to the lowest common denominator and get popular.
I mean, you know, people who are not making one dime, they're not making any money off of it, off of being a public figure. They will tweet stuff on their Twitter based on what they know will be popular, right? Mm-hmm. Because they'll get more fake like hearts and retweets on this Twitter that does not accrue them any money or doesn't help them in any way. But the fact that something will get them more like fake attention from the internet will cause them to adjust their views and censor themselves when they realize what they're saying is unpopular, and boost what they're saying.
Well, I mean, you know, sometimes I'm scared of saying certain things that are going to be very unpopular, because if I criticize, you know, the ex-Muslim community that I'm part of, then I'm going to get a lot of hate. And so I do feel like I censor myself sometimes.
Yeah, well, to me, maybe the worst thing is the tendency that social media has to make you more negative and criticize people in a very harsh way that the people who are your followers and in your bubble will like. You know, if I tweet something about how bad Dave Rubin is, it's going to get, I don't know, 5 times more like likes and retweets than if I tweet my opinion about something.
But no, you know what? Like, if you tweet about how bad Islam is or how bad Muslims are, it's going to get way more. Like, way more. And the thing is, when I started criticizing Dave Rubin like a year ago, almost, maybe a year and a half ago, almost nobody agreed with me. Everybody like sent me hate for it.
But the thing is, within the community you're a part of, right?
Yeah.
So it's whatever following you sort of self-select for. So like a lot of my Twitter followers are big Hillary Clinton fans.
Yeah, yeah.
So
well, yeah, I guess social media has a way of reinforcing your,
you find bubbles.
making an echo chamber type thing. But that's why I guess it's good to court people of diverse views. Like, I do criticize Islam, and I do criticize Islam critics. So I try to get like a mix of followers.
Well, the thing that Ruben talks about is being ideologically open to talking to people and listening to them and listening to people who have different views than you. All that is great. I try to do that. I try to do that as much as possible. And there are conservatives.
But he doesn't try to do that.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
But what he says he does is actually pretty good. And,
Sure, yeah, but he doesn't do it.
And a lot of what we have to do is sort of stare the social media beast in the eye and say, if I say something really mean about Bernie Sanders that I don't even agree with, but it's really snarky and really sort of, incisive, I might get a lot of people retweeting my tweet, and I'm sort of adding to this negative echo chamber that I don't even really agree with. I may have criticisms of him that are much more mild and more nuanced that wouldn't get a lot of people.
You gotta understand, nuance is never popular. You gotta be like, the simplest answer to everything. Islam bad, West good, 1,000 retweets.
Yeah, well, although at the same time, I think, it's not a ideological problem on social media.
No, nuance is bad all around. Like, nobody likes nuance.
I think the difference, though, is that the sort of media institutions on the left have values and principles and ethics, and on the right, very few do. Just, objectively. Fox News is way worse than the New York Times. It's not close. It's not like, which one? InfoWars is a lot worse.
Yeah, it's sad you have to say that even.
Yeah, InfoWars is complete nonsense. CNN is news. You may disagree with it, you may not like it, but it's news.
Well, let's talk about this Trump tweet, this beating up CNN. Like, some people are calling it incitement to violence, and some people were, really objecting to that characterization, which I think, it's in a climate where reporters are getting body slammed, where the tensions are so high, where the president has been working long and hard to discredit the media. It is absolutely, I think, fair to say that that's a very dangerous line that he's walking, and can be interpreted as incitement by crazy people, which are everywhere nowadays.
I think it is incitement.
Someone could be completely inspired by that. There was that thread from the journalist who said, we actually fear for our lives now.
Yeah. I think it's obviously when people actually murder someone, the person who is the murderer,
that's their fault, obviously. Yeah.
No, but I think usually it's somebody who is deeply disturbed in some way. And it's very rare. Like, a lot of times people will talk about killing someone. They're not actually going to do it. Like, I had someone say they were going to kill me to my face when I was door knocking for Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania. And I knew he was not going to kill me. But, that sort of rhetoric, I think it's not so much that it causes violence, because maybe it increases the risk of violence, and just that is wrong, and it's totally unacceptable, and it's horrible. But I think the main reason that it's bad is not that it increases the chance of violence. I think the main reason that it's bad is that it destroys the ability of the public to function as a fact-based thinking entity where we listen to facts and deliberate about them in a sane way. It's destroying these institutions that we need to have a free press. We need to have a country where we can all look at basic facts and agree on what's true and what's false. Where conspiracy theories do not become legitimate types of opinions. And that's where we are. The president is a conspiracy theorist.
Oh, definitely. Like, he loves InfoWars.
He doesn't care about facts. He hates facts.
He hates facts.
And that is so dangerous. Because if you
Happy 4th of July.
It's the road to authoritarianism and everything that, liberal democracy. Like, you cannot have a liberal democracy in a world.
The anti-SJWs told me the road to authoritarianism is politeness and gender pronouns.
Yeah, we're being too nice to transgender people. That's really the problem.
That's absolutely the problem.
No, but that is the problem. And if you actually believe in what liberal values and the Constitution and decency and all these social conservative values, you have to hate Trump and what he's doing. And if you're not on board with that, then I don't know, you're part of it.
Yeah, I mean, so many people will say, well, not all Trump voters are racist. Okay, I grant you that. But everyone who voted for Trump was willing to give him a pass on some really vile, racist, misogynistic stuff. That is not okay. I'm not okay with that.
Well, I think it's very hard to sort of take people who are voters and talk about what they're supposed to do, because the whole idea is that you try to influence voters to agree with you. But it's individual people who are in the media or are writers or whatever, if they're listening to what's going on and they're okay with it, it's like all I need to know about them.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. It's all I need to know about their values, because either they are so willing, they're on the right and they're willing to totally throw away everything they say they care about when it comes to decency and being fact-based and being sane and, just being a normal, decent human being, like acting like a decent person. They're willing to throw that away for the benefit of like getting a tax cut for rich people and deregulating.
It's not even just like his, lack of decency. He's also very fucking stupid.
Oh, yeah.
He's so stupid.
No, it's insulting how stupid he is.
It really is. That's why I feel bad for Hillary for having lots to someone like this. Is such an insult.
Well, it's an insult. It's an insult to the country.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah.
But
it's an embarrassment.
If you listen to someone talk like that and you say, well, you know what? We need to treat that person like they're making sense because liberals are bad.
Yeah.
And
I have never cared about a U.S. election this much. I was so upset for like 2 days.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. But if you are not, I mean, to me, there is this right-wing authoritarian movement around the Western world, and
Trump is sort of offsetting that a bit, thankfully, like France and.
Well, I think Trump is such a parody of how terrible that is. And
yeah, exactly. So ultimately, hopefully, that trend will continue, and
maybe the saving grace is the fact that the policies are so stupid and so unpopular that when you actually try to implement them, and you actually have to deal with facts and whether your policies make any sense, you can't just yell from a stage. It makes them less popular and it makes them less powerful. But if you're in this media environment and you're listening to Trump and you're not doing it and you're not saying anything about it, I think you're complicit in accepting his behavior as normal. And that just by itself.
I get really surprised by people that I, really like and respect, like Fareed Zakaria, like after one not totally unhinged speech by Trump where he was like, I think Trump became the president last night, or what? That is, some really low expectives.
He read a speech of a teleprompter, so let's ignore everything we know about him.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
People are just like so ready to give Trump chances. I don't get it. Like, they're really treating him with kid gloves. And this is what the same people are like, the same people on the right who want Trump to be treated with kid gloves are like, liberals need to be told, tell it like it is, and Muslims need to hear the truth, call a spade a spade, and With Trump and Trumpians, it's like, oh, let's treat them gently and try to reach out to them. And
no, I think if you have a lot of Trump fans who are your audience and you're in the media, it is your job to piss them off until, even if it means costing yourself your job.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, nobody's obliged to lose their jobs over pissing off Trump. Oh, and that reminds me of one more thing. Let me tell you how much I really think Reza Aslan is an idiot. But the one time he was spot on was when he said bad stuff about Trump, and they fired him for that. Like, they didn't fire him for, like, eating a piece of human brain out of a skull, or like.
Hey, well, cannibalism is a complicated human. Let's not be.
Let's not jump to judgment here. Like, he only ate part of another human.
Well, is there anything necessarily wrong with cannibalism? I think it's a.
Oh wow, you actually want to have this conversation? That's like a long con. Like, yes, obviously there is. I think
it's an interesting conversation to have about cannibalism, but
another time.
Yeah, but he got canned by CNN for calling Trump a piece of shit, I think.
Yeah.
And
didn't Anderson Cooper say something like, you'd defend him if he took a dump on your desk to some dude?
Yes.
Obviously, that shows how valuable Anderson Cooper is.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny when Trump has no respect for any sort of decency. He's talking about the anchor is on a morning news show and they're bleeding out of their.
What's his obsession with bleeding? Why?
Well, it's women and bleeding.
Women bleeding, yeah. What a creep he is on so many levels.
Yeah, he's one of those people who he seems like almost just like uneasy with like female sexuality in a way.
Yeah, absolutely, in a very childish way.
Yeah, he's like a 14-year-old who like brags about having sex, who's never had sex before.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
But he's so just adolescent in his sort of way he treats people. But the fact that people are so offended by people who criticize Trump in a potty mouthed way,
mm-hmm.
it's so ironic. It's so.
Well, and Trump is tweeting about, memes from racists about beating up CNN.
Oh, like that guy was that. It's the same thing as the sheriff star tweet. Where
yeah. With Hillary having like a Star of David, right? Something like that.
Yeah, well, it's basically white supremacist neo-Nazis are creating
these memes that are appealing to Trump.
And he's tweeting about himself. I mean, it's like if this was in a book. This is in a movie, you'd be like, no.
Yeah, no. If you told me this would be happening like 2 years ago, I'd call you insane.
Well, there are all these people who are Republicans who are supposed to be like sane, decent people, like John McCain. If you're John McCain, John McCain, just quit your freaking job and say, I resigned from the Republican Party. This is insane.
Wasn't he like anti-Trump for a while?
Yeah, well, Trump called him, he said he wasn't a war hero because he got captured.
Yeah, that's right. There's been so much stuff, Alex. It's so hard to keep it all in my brain. I've never had such a hard time keeping up with all the bullshit any politician does. Like, usually it's like, one big scandal in a year, or like, it's like 20 scandals a day. How do you...
The information in my brain from the Republican primary and general election of all the horrible things that happened, it's like PTSD I'm carrying with myself from all this. And you get like, desensitized to how insane every single different thing is. But,
yeah, absolutely. If it was that one thing on its own, it would be maybe a big deal. But now it's like, happening every day. You're like, okay, yeah, it's just Trump again.
I mean, the scariest thing, I think I want to sort of end pretty soon, but like,
it's getting late.
The scariest tweet, I think, is his saber rattling about North Korea. And
this guy could cause some serious damage to the world, and we're your neighbors, so please.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot trust him to manage war and peace. And the worst case scenario when it comes to war in the Korean Peninsula is massive economic damage to the world, is maybe millions of people dying, is tens of thousands of US troops are in Korea right now at the DMZ defending South Korea. And we have this guy who's totally uninformed, has no filter on what he says, has no appreciation for his actions. He has no self-control.
Why does he still have access to a Twitter account? They should just take it away from him.
And he's dealing with people who are also not really equipped to be running a country, because they have like a cult, basically.
Yeah.
North Korea is a crazy country, and they have nuclear weapons, and they have, you know, like an army of like 2 million people that's has like tens of thousands of pieces of artillery aimed at one of the largest cities in the world.
This is like a real positive note to end on.
Yeah, but it is where the worst case scenario of this guy, his dumb tweets, is really fucking bad.
It really is. It really is. And I mean,
so, you know, it's one of those things. It's a trade-off. It's like, do we say, you know, let's not focus on Trump being crazy because there's real policy at stake. That's something I try to focus on too. You know, as a consumer of news and someone who's trying to be a little bit of an activist, I volunteered for all of the congressional elections we had where we lost every single one, and you know, and I've been trying to talk about the healthcare bill, and I've been calling my Congress people, my senators, and trying to do all the stuff I can about that. But that stuff is incredibly frightening. Or the Supreme Court. Oh my God, there's so much stuff that's like, it's real policy that's being changed in a negative direction, and backwards
in time.
Yeah, well, it's like George W. Bush, but turned to 11. It is so much more extreme and far right, and it feels like we can barely afford it right now. You know, going so far backwards on all those different things, and Trump is almost a distraction from all the horrible things his party is doing, and what he's like not even paying attention to. He doesn't even know what's in the bill that he's trying to pass. That's going to reform our.
Yeah, that Twitter account where they have like this image of him, I don't know, drawing with a crayon and holding the paper up to everyone. Have you seen that? That's so perfect. So perfect for him.
Yeah, he has the Republican Party is reforming all of healthcare in the United States, and they're going to leave millions of people uninsured, unless we stop them.
But what has he done that's indefensible, Alex?
But he doesn't even know that there are tax cuts in his healthcare bill. And are there tax cuts of a large amount? Only $750 billion worth. Like, holy crap. Like, how do you not know that? I mean, I was talking to my dad about this. Here's what I compared it to. Have you ever had one of those dreams where you're driving and the car is like moving without your control, and you can't like keep the car on the road, and you're like swerving back and forth, and you're like,
I've never had a driving dream, but I have only recently learned to drive. So maybe I've had a falling dream.
Yeah, well, I think if you drive a lot, or you've driven, I think the driving out of control dream is something that a lot of people have, but it's one of those things of the country is not under the control of a sane mind who knows what they're doing at all.
That's not a very comforting feeling at all for anyone near you, guys.
Yeah. No, it's the world. It affects everyone in the world.
Yeah. So happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July. The most patriotic thing you can do is try to stop Trump in some way.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Do it, guys.
All right. Well, I think we'll draw to a close. It's so nice talking to you. You're very articulate about this stuff, and you really thought about it. And I'm very impressed just by your willingness to take people on and say stuff that's willingly going to make you very controversial and unpopular.
Yeah, I don't know. That's like not one of my good qualities. That's probably why I left religion in the first place. But yeah, I can't keep my mouth shut when something bothers me. But thank you, Alex. Always a pleasure talking to you. We should definitely do one of our, combined videos again sometime.
Yeah, next time we get enough material from Ruben.
Yeah, maybe we do like a Gad one or something, or Jordan Peterson, maybe. Who knows? Who knows where we go?
There's so many insane people.
Many, yeah.
There's no shortage in 2017. Yeah. All right.
Take care. Bye.